cybercrime is expected to be about a $16 trillion business by 2030. That's not that far away. And if you put that into proportions of GDP, it would be the third largest GDP in the world.
Hello, I'm Giles Gherson, and this is Toronto Talks, the voice of Toronto's business community. What are we talking about? Each episode is a conversation with top business leaders about how they're shaping growth, driving competitiveness, and building up our economy. It's about what they believe it will take to make sure the Toronto region remains one of the world's great global cities. Here's today's conversation. Sasha, welcome to Toronto Talks.
Nice to be here.
Board of Trade podcast. Now, you've been CEO of Mastercard Canada. You went from that to leading Mastercard's global integration of Recorded Future, a Boston-based cybersecurity platform, to integrate that into the Mastercard system. But in all that career, I know these other things as well, but just in your Mastercard career, you've been around the world, you've worked around the world. What is that? How do you look at Toronto differently and the business community here from that experience, from the vantage point of that experience?
Well, I will say the first thing I noticed when I came back from living overseas was the amount of construction in Toronto, which I will say is a good thing. We can talk about that.
Well,
we can debate that.
Good.
We can debate that, but that is a good activity. But on a more serious note, I think Toronto has all of the elements that great cities are looking for, right? Like, we have great talent, we have great diversity, we have strong institutions, we have a business community that really wants to lean in, engage, compete, and win. And I think when you put that all together, we've got all the right ingredients. The challenge for Toronto, in my mind, is taking those ingredients and turning them into action.
If you think about some of the cities you've lived in, which would be the ones that would, if you thought Toronto could sort of, try to some degree emulate, what would maybe it's a combination, but
yeah, I mean, I think Toronto and Canada as a whole, we haven't had a burning platform because we have been comfortable, we've had it good, and that's a very nice way to live. But the rest of the world is really trying to figure out how to be better, right? And so when you think about Sweden, one of the things I was really impressed with Stockholm and Sweden is they create this and they keep this very beautiful downtown core, and they do all their innovation and their high-rise buildings outside of the downtown core. You can argue whether that's right or wrong, but the point is that it's intentional and it's planned and it's aligned.
So it's almost like a sort of a series of kind of hubs around Stockholm. Is that what it feels like?
It's exactly that. And I think the other thing about Stockholm that I found really interesting in Sweden in general is it has a massive number of people who move out. They go out and experience the world, but they somehow all come home. And I think that is a really important thing for Canada to think about, because we have incredible talent. We should send them out in the world in order to do great things and collect great experiences. I had the benefit of doing that, but we need them to come home, and I think we can get them home.
Well, that's great, because I mean that is one of the things that we talk about is the sort of the brain drain, the talent exodus. Now, one thing I wanted to talk a bit about was you're chair of the Toronto Region Board of Trade. You've been on the board since 2000. Was it 2000?
2022, I think.
2022. So after COVID. In that time, you've had a chance to sort of obviously take in what we do and lead what we do, and to get your sense of how that has maybe changed, if at all, your sense of the Toronto business community from the lens of being chair of the Toronto Region Board of Trade, because you're seeing maybe a wider selection of companies now that come across.
I mean, I think one of the things that we're hearing a lot of is this is Canada's moment, and there's some pride in that, also maybe some sheepishness and a bit of a recognition that we've fallen asleep at the wheel over the last number of years, perhaps a couple decades, in getting too comfortable and having other countries and markets catch up to us. So I think there is a recognition that we're a great country, we have the capability. There is an incredible amount of focus on collaboration. So really understanding that government, private sector, public sector, institutions have to work together. And there is a desire, I think, increasingly to move from policy and talk to action. And I would challenge the action to be one of sustainable action, because I think we can do a project or make something happen, but if it's a one-time event, that's not actually going to change how we operate as a region and as a country. I think what we are hearing, though, is a growing recognition that there needs to be inputs from different perspectives in order to make that happen, right? So whether that's regulation, whether that's tax rate, whether that's input into an investment into innovation, that can't be done just by one sector alone. It has to be a cross-collaborative effort.
And it is interesting. I think you're absolutely right. When in the conversations we've been part of with senior business leaders in the city, where they do feel that now is the time for action. We've had this wake-up call. Yes. I think that's what I'm sensing from our business community. Yes. They want to see government take some big risks, make some big moves, recognizing that it won't be politically easy, but it has to be done because, as you said, this is our moment.
And then the other way to kind of define that would be making a choice, right? Like we have an opportunity right now to make a choice, to act differently, to show up differently, to put in policies, processes that can enable us to be different and more productive, more competitive. That means we've got to identify barriers quickly. We've got to break them down, and we have to turn that into action. Because I think when you're making a choice, you have to move very quickly from talk to action.
Well, or it gets tied up. We've seen plenty of that. But it is interesting. I do think that what we see with the Carney government in Ottawa, and to some degree with the Ford government as well at Queen's Park, is the public is much more accepting of change than most people would have expected. And when we look at Bay Street, we're seeing a lot of support for a Liberal government to making the moves that they're making. So
I think it's because a lot of it also has like a very clear connection in how it's being discussed and presented.
Well, to your point, there's clarity there.
There's clarity. It's also not just about a policy decision. It's about a policy decision that can impact an action, a project that has a downstream impact to people's lives. And ultimately, from Canadians' perspective and Torontonians' perspective, that's what they're looking for, is how does this impact me as an individual or as a citizen so that it can come full circle.
Let's go back to your role as chair of the Toronto Region Board of Trade. First of all, what made you say yes to that? Because it actually takes a bit of time. You're a busy person. You've got a lot of pressure. You've been on a lot of national organizations as well as this. But you said yes to us, which we're greatly appreciative of. But
I did for I think two or three primary reasons. The first is I think collective leadership is incredibly important, right? And so the problems or the challenges that are facing the Toronto region and the things we need to do to bring back our productivity and our competitiveness can't be solved by any particular sector. I think the Toronto region, in the individual sector, and I think one of the things I love about the Toronto Region Board of Trade and the work that you're doing and that we're doing together is the fact that it is so cross-sectoral, right? Like it needs to have financial services, technology, manufacturing, health sciences, all working together to identify what we can do better for this region. So that cross-sectoral piece was absolutely one that was critical to me. Two, I think there is there's power in and a responsibility to do more than just your individual business. So I think as business leaders, we can't just look at how we lead our business. We have the opportunity and the privilege to provide a greater voice to what's right for our region, our city, our country. That was a big one. And the third is that the challenges that the Toronto Region Board of Trade is trying to address are real and they are meaningful, not only for the businesses that we lead, but for our families. And we all live here. So productivity, competitiveness, we all want our families and our colleagues and our friends to be able to work and live in a city that is very robust. And I think the Toronto Region Board of Trade is the personification of making that happen.
No, that's great. I mean, your point about cross-sectoral is a really interesting one here because I'm always amazed when I talk to Americans or business people who may have only been to Toronto once or twice or maybe never at all, and they think of us very differently from what we are actually. This is one of the most diverse economies in North America. I often say we're the one city that manufactures airplanes and cars and bicycles, and trains. So we've got this amazing, but we're a big tech sector, probably the second or third largest tech sector in North America. We've got
a number of universities,
so huge academic sector, research sector, life sciences. We're one of the top life sciences places, jurisdictions. Then I think about things like food processing, very large sector here. So it's really, really diverse. And it's fascinating when you get around our table and you've got people from these different sectors all kind of saying the same thing, but from a slightly...
And that's where you see the themes that come out, right? The themes that say, regulation is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a bad thing if it doesn't serve a purpose. If it creates some guardrails or it creates guidelines, then that's a good thing, as long as they're appropriate.
But there's too much. You can have too much of a good thing, is what they often say.
Fair enough. But the point is, it's the theme then that gives the Toronto Region Board of Trade the ability to have the meaningful conversations with government on what needs to change and how it needs to be changed, because the voice of the Toronto Region Board of Trade is not unisector. It actually
we transcend sectors.
Exactly.
And that, I think, gives us a bit of weight with government, right? They don't see us coming as a sector as a sectoral organization, but as an economy-wide organization. I think makes a lot of sense. I want to get into financial services a bit more, because that's where you've had a large chunk of your career, but most recently, in the sort of the cybersecurity space, and that's a fascinating sort of juxtaposition of financial services, the biggest sector in Toronto, in the region, and then sort of tech and cyber. And obviously, the cyber threat is probably most prevalent in the financial services sector. So you've managed to see both those pieces come together. Talk a little bit about that, because that's a fast changing environment, right? I mean, now we're talking about the advent of quantum, so, which is going to really add to the cybersecurity question, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, the notion of cybersecurity is one that everybody should be thinking about. It is not,
get their heads around it,
but it's not that difficult in terms of the fundamentals, right? The fundamentals are, as our businesses grow, as our world becomes increasingly more digital, everything we do is on a device as opposed to increasingly in-person interaction. All of those devices provide entry points for dangerous actors to steal information, misappropriate credentials, and do bad things with it. It's as simple as that in terms of what their goals are. And so from a cybersecurity perspective, I think we're seeing a shift of, it used to be just the IT folks would think about it, right? And the IT folks would come to the board or to management
their problem
once a year and say, here's what we need to work on. But it does need to be an enterprise awareness, because it's shifting rapidly from just the IT sector to, if you think about employee satisfaction and employee engagement is really critical, because you can have insider threats where an employee who's unsatisfied or disgruntled, they can do really damaging things. If you issue phones to all of your employees, or if you let your employees bring their own devices, that also creates risk. So it's about recognizing that in a digital world, every interaction we have with a digital device presents a risk. And that risk increases whether you're thinking about how you work, where you work, who you work with. And so that, from that perspective, I think cybersecurity is rapidly becoming less of a niche play and much more an awareness at the enterprise and the management level.
But that makes it actually, in some ways, feel almost intractable, in the sense that it's lurking behind every decision almost. And you can't be, you've got to run your business. You've got to focus on the things that, they're going to drive your business forward. And this is this constant threat. There's really not much opportunity in it. It's really threat, right?
The opportunity is to reduce the threat, right? And that's, put some numbers behind it. Cybercrime is expected to be about a $16 trillion business, if I can put it that way, or the impacts of cybercrime by 2030. That's not that far away. And if you put that into proportions of GDP, it would be the third largest GDP in the world. And so that is huge.
The country called
cybercrime would be larger than would be the third largest GDP in the world by 2030. And so that should make you stop and think about, how do I make sure that I am preventing this so that I can continue to drive opportunities for growth?
But when it's that big, it begins in alternative forms. It sounds like the big plastic island in the middle of the Pacific, so big that you'll never, ever be able to get rid of it, right? You maybe reduce its growth, but never really get rid of it. That cybercrime sounds a little bit like that. If it's that big, you can attenuate its growth, perhaps, right? But doesn't it sound like it's kind of...
it is that big, but the island in the middle of the Pacific is one you have to figure out how to wrap your arms around. That cybercrime, I would say, is more insidious in terms of it's got different entry points, right? It's got different tentacles because you need to protect your supply chains. It can enter through your supply chains. It can enter through your employees. It can enter through your product distribution. So if you actually chunk it down and you're thinking about, from the start, how do I make sure everything I do in my company is safe and secure, as opposed to doing what I normally do and then try and bolting on some security afterwards, you're putting it into the fabric. It's just like when we used to figure out how to use the internet years ago, right? Like you need to use the internet as part of your business processes as opposed to bolting it on afterwards.
But when you think about, so that all sounds great. Mm-hmm. Then you've got the rapid advance in technology, which opens up new avenues to cybercrime, new opportunities for criminals, and new requirements for defense. You think about, Mythos from Anthropic. You think, and people go, well, what is that going to mean? It's another whole kind of threat environment, really. I mentioned quantum. I mean, the reason I mentioned quantum, of course, is that once we have quantum technologies, I mean, they will be able to crack encryption from the most sophisticated advanced tools we have today. It's going to require a whole new reconsideration of security.
Yes, but those are big changes. Right?
Yeah.
And big changes happen at once. There's a lot of things that happen before then. And if you also think about the makeup of our businesses across Canada and reflected in the Toronto region, you can divide them into large enterprises, mid-enterprises, and small enterprises. Yeah. And most
are small.
Most are in that small to mid-range. And their threats are fundamentally different, right? Like big enterprises, big companies, they're enterprise targets because they have data that's valuable.
Massive number of employees, all the rest of it, yeah.
But they also have the resources and the wherewithal to be more protected and to invest more in that. Small businesses, the really small ones, are the ones that are significantly at risk because a single cyber attack that takes down a website of a small business owner, like the number of small businesses that can recover from that is actually quite low, right? But that's a different type of an issue, if you will, or a solution that people need to be thinking about. I think for the Toronto region, we really need to also think a lot about the mid-sized businesses, the suppliers and the companies that support the larger enterprise, because they don't have necessarily the sophistication or the tools or the capacity.
But they're getting into these companies.
And they also have, one of their biggest risks, I think, is supply chain, because they receive goods from other partners, they manufacture them, or they add value to them, and then they sell them on to bigger enterprise. Like all of that supply chain is an entry point for cyber threats and cybercrime. And so that's where I think, to your point, you can think about the big looming beast, but there's smaller, more actionable beasts that we need to slay, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, I know, that's an interesting way of looking at it. It kind of forces companies to be in that mindset, which probably should be helpful when it comes to cybersecurity.
Yes, which means you're incrementally improving yourself and not waiting for that big behemoth to hit.
But it means very high standards. It's kind of the bottom line of that.
Well, you should have high standards.
Which you should have. I mean, that's what we're aiming for. So in many ways, it's another factor of that. But it does mean, I think it is interesting when you think about the larger companies, and MasterCard would be one, but where probably 20 years ago, as you said, it was the IT department's concern. Now, most large companies, I'm thinking, have quite a number of people who are engaged in, that's what they do, cybersecurity.
Big numbers of people in cybersecurity, in privacy, in artificial intelligence, because all of those companies that are operating at the enterprise scale are embedding that in everything they do from the start, as opposed, like, it's changing processes, it's changing design principles, it's changing distribution protocols.
And it's a whole new set of a category of jobs, too. I mean, it's interesting. Again, it's part of that whole, as we talk about how technology displaces people, and it does, but it often can lead to quite exciting jobs that didn't exist, years before. And you lose some of the maybe more tedious, routine jobs that that used to exist. You see this on plant floors. You see this in offices now with kind of more interesting, because these are pretty exciting jobs.
Absolutely, all in the you can connect the growth of jobs from cyber to risk to data analytics. Like all of those are connected.
I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, it really is the changing landscape of of a corporate culture that we haven't, that I think are just only growing in time, unless they all become taken over by AI and it'll be automated. It doesn't feel that way. It doesn't sound like change is going to be enough. I wanted to just, last question, since we were talking about financial services, is if you look at other countries around the world, you see substantial changes in, say, the way things like open banking, for example. The UK would be a good example. I'm not sure how well it's worked, but there's certainly been a trend around the world towards things like open banking, where customer data must be able to be transferred from one institution to another. Whereas in Canada, it's still more proprietary. It's more held by the financial institution that the customer banks with. Do you see? I mean, is that the next big change, do you think, for Canadian Financial Services is a move in that direction? Or was it overblown? Is your sense it was kind of overblown as an issue in other countries that really hasn't made that much difference?
Well, I think a couple elements of that. One is, the benefit of open banking is it gives consumers and businesses the choice, as you say, of where how they use their data, where they share their data with other trusted providers so that they can get better services. So that's always a good thing. It also means that it opens the door to greater innovation so that people who are thinking about what could these services be have an opportunity to not only build them and scale them. I think that's all very positive from a productivity. Absolutely, absolutely, which increases more competition. It sort of creates that cycle of innovation, competition, better services, economic growth. I think Canada is moving in the direction, but it's a bit slow, and it's a little bit, get back to our early conversation, is we haven't really had a burning platform
to do it
because we've had stability. But
that's the watchword of the Canadian financial sector, really. It's been very strong because it's been so stable.
Yeah, but stable. You can have stable without innovation. You can have stable with innovation. Innovation doesn't, by definition.
We'll take the latter.
Innovation doesn't. Innovation doesn't, by nature, disrupt stability. I think it just creates a broader economic engine upon which our country can operate, and more importantly, I think consumers and businesses deserve choice.
And do you think, and going back to the very start of the conversation where we're talking about the burning platform that we're seeing across the economy now, do you think we're going to see that in financial services? Will that be caught up in that, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know that I would specify to financial services. I think every sector is getting to the recognition where what has worked for us for the last 10 or 20 years is not going to work to drive growth, either in Canada or particularly if we're competing on the global stage. So I think we need to find a way to scale innovation in a more substantial way in Canada. We're good at onesie-twosies. We're good at ideas. We're not good at commercializing at scale.
Great at ideas. Yeah, commercializing. I always tell people always astounded when I say the light bulb was invented in Toronto, and yet Philips and GE were not Canadian companies. But it's probably the best example I can think of something that everybody uses, shouldn't exist without it now, and invented in Toronto, patented here, but not commercialized here.
It's a great example.
So we've got to do better than that. Sasha, thank you very much. I think we've come to the end of our time, but what a great conversation. Really enjoyed it. Thrilled that you're chair of our board, and we've got a lot of road ahead of us.
Great. Well, it's lovely to work with you, and I think the commitment of the Toronto Region Board of Trade to building the capacity, the competitiveness, and the scale of our region is absolutely incredible. I'm pleased to be a part of it.
Fantastic. Off we go.
Let's go. Let's do it.
Thanks for listening to Toronto Talks, conversations with the leaders shaping the region's economy. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts.